and
Yes.
I don't remember talking about this, but there's a story of Ellie and Joel coming to
Uh-huh.
HBO.
Yeah.
Technically old news,
Yeah.
because it was originally announced on October 20th, 2020. I don't remember
Right.
discussing this. I could be wrong.
So I
And
believe that we what we had back then was it was going to be a Last of Us show,
maybe
but we didn't know who it was going to be about.
some of
Like we
the
didn't know,
information. Yeah.
right? We didn't know what the story was going to be about. We didn't know if it was going to be The Walking Dead or the what is the other one? What's the side project? What's the
Left 4
uh,
Dead.
Fear the Walking Dead?
Fear of the Walking Dead, right? We didn't know if it was going to be Walking Dead or give us a whole new story from the Last of Us world, right?
Right.
So the fact that it's a story about Ellie and Joel, I think that is kind of pretty fresh for us.
And
We
Zach didn't even let
definitely
me
haven't
finish
talked about it.
introducing the topic either. He just jumped right in on this one.
Hey,
I'll go ahead and
You
finish.
couldn't
though.
remember, so I wanted to help.
there's no announced release date for this. Neil Druckmann, who's the creative director and the co-president of Naughty Dog, we just had a couple episodes ago where we were talking about his promotion, which again, congrats to him on that. And I do believe he penned the original Last of Us, and he definitely worked on The Last of Us 2. He's co-writing the script, and he stated that he plans to remain true to both the events and the spirit of the video game. The show will hew very closely to the game's plot, and there's so far no information on actors. There's quite a bit of other stuff that they just we don't know anything. We do know that Ellie, Joel, Tess, the main characters of the game, and then some unnamed characters that are presumably from the second game are gonna most likely be in there. We don't really know, but it's interesting. Last week's podcast, we were talking about Sony had announced that they have like what was it, 7 TV shows and like 3 movies that they were coming out based on their on PlayStation titles. And I know I was mentioning, and even though this I don't remember really talking much about it, but we obviously know Uncharted's coming, and now we know for sure, because I paid attention to it today or this week, that there is a Last of Us one coming out, and it's going to be interesting to see. The way Neil Druckmann described it, and you know what? Let me go ahead and open this article here to kind of describe, because he used a Stephen King quote that I thought was absolutely great. Because I'm reading The Stand right now, and this quote was from The Stand. So for those of you who don't know anything about The Stand, the original version of The Stand was released in what am I doing here? I'm pressing wrong buttons. The original Stand was released in the 70s, and then it was updated for the 90s. Mm-hmm. And oh my gosh, hold on, let me just maximize. And so Stephen King had a quote at the beginning of this, and I just wanted to read what his quote was. And this is kind of how Neil Druckmann's direction is going to be with this. Stephen King wrote at the beginning of The Stand, it was just for the reader, he wrote, "You will not discover old characters behaving in new ways, nor will the course of the tale branch off at some point from the old narrative taking you, constant reader, in an entirely different direction. This version of The Stand is an expansion of the original novel. As I've said, you won't find old characters behaving in strange new ways, but you will discover that almost all of the characters were, in the book's original form, doing more things. And if I didn't think some of those things were interesting, perhaps even enlightening, I would have never agreed to this project." Meaning, if you've ever read The Stand, if you read the original 1970s version of The Stand, and then you read the re-release, the final uncut edition that was released in the 90s. It was all the 70s, pop culture and stuff was updated to 90s pop culture, and there was more. There's so much more in the book. There was 500 additional pages added to the book that was initially just stripped and cut out of the original story, and it adds so much more to the character development and the story itself. But it didn't change how things happen. So Neil Druckmann used that quote to say, they're going to tell the story on HBO. It's not going to change what you know about these characters. They're not going to do things that they wouldn't have done in the game. We're not retelling the story. We're just adding things pretty much. So
Right.
they're kind of expanding on it, and it being in just the television format, I think it could be good.
The direct opposite of this makes me think of The Walking Dead with the character of Andrea.
Yeah.
If you read the comics, Andrea was great, like a great character in the comics. In the show, she was awful. You wanted nothing to do with her, and you're like, this is not Andrea at all. Now, of course, that show went a totally. I mean, it took a whole bunch of liberties,
Right.
and that's fine. Robert Kirkman was a part of the show, and writers never stop writing. Sometimes they're like, you know what, I wish I did with that character, and throw some things in there.
Some writers don't know how to kill their darlings either.
That's right, but what I will say about this is that it's going to be interesting because especially with the first game. So I imagine the first season, okay, of this show being very much the first game, right? And maybe only part of it. Maybe they'll break the game up into like 2 seasons or something. So I imagine it being the first game for 1 or 2 seasons. And the thing about that is that it is such a beloved game that the show could get torn apart if they make any weird decisions that the fans don't love, because it is such a beloved franchise. And that's the danger with creating shows or movies, for that matter, after IPs that people already love. For example, think about Prince of Persia. Oh boy, man, there's some hate around that, huh?
Well, yeah. I'm just going to jump in here and say there is. I look at this and go, okay, it was bound to happen eventually. People love that, but
Jerry can't wait for season 3 and 4, right? When they get into the second game.
I think I'm going to make the news when those things come out. It's but there's a problem though, right? So for example, in the Prince of Persia, you never know who the prince's name is. It's never been told to you, so it allows so you can say, well, this was a prince of Persia. Pick whatever moment in time, and you can follow his story because it's left ambiguous. Uncharted.
His name's not Jake Gyllenhaal?
No, that was for. Boy, the volume on that guy's hair. I gotta be honest. The
bounce, bro.
We're all jealous.
Yeah, you guys can come close. This is very sheepish. Like, it doesn't really. Anyway, back on point. So it's kind of like, but like, for example, when you go to Uncharted, you can play. Uncharted, you have like Nathan Drake. You can say, well, it leaves itself open that you can go and experience all these other things because Drake's adventures. There's a big enough space that you can tell these. The Last of Us, no, that story has there are some parameters in that story which make it difficult to actually make it involving story. I mean, if you're going to drag it out and just have a bunch of filler, and like to Zach's point, it's such a beloved game. It's one of my favorite games, the first one anyway. So I'd be watching it and going, okay, well.
Joel would never say that. Right. You know what I mean?
Like, okay, we're taking our time on this. Okay.
Yeah, this Joel sounds nothing like Troy Baker. Ridiculous.
Right, sure. And
Why not just get Troy Baker anyway?
They should just cast him and make him look like an older
agree.
guy.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem, though, is that so many of us love that especially the first game.
Yeah.
So many of us love the first game that the fact of the matter is many of us have played it multiple times. Yeah. So we know these characters.
Yeah.
Very well at this point. Yeah. And we know how they talk, how they interact, what they would like, how they would engage in different circumstances.
Exactly.
It's dangerous.
This is why I think it's important to note that that's why Neil Druckmann, who wrote the original script for the first game, is co-writing the script. And not to mention the composer for the game for Last of Us 1 and 2 is supposed to be composing the TV show as well. So we're going to still get that
And
vibe.
that's all great.
I mean,
That's all great.
But here's my thing
Walking
with
Dead.